This is the Constructionist Podcast, where we take ancient stories, the person of Jesus, current events and topics, and help you construct a new Christian worldview that's relevant and loving to those around you. I'm your host, Kevin Bates. I'm a semiotician and community builder looking at the signs of the times to build a better future together. You are tuned into the Constructionist Podcast, and tonight we are continuing our series through the book of Mark. We encourage a worldview here at the Constructionists that are built on the principles of Christ, and we are examining the life of Christ through a clear and honest lens. So by doing so, we hope to offer insights and perspectives that will help you in your journey towards a greater understanding of love and compassion for yourself and others. Now, we want to assure you that in tonight's episode, we're not fabricating anything with the scriptures, as many have done. So the information or the ideas that we provide, we've either researched them, we'll give reference to them, or when we're just guessing, we're going to tell you we're guessing. But our goal is to provide an honest and authentic perspective of our examination. So we call this our thinking space, and we are presenting ideas and thoughts. And tonight we're making our best attempt to explain very practical theologies to live by. So if you enjoy the Constructionist Podcast and want to support us financially, please follow the link in the chat or the show notes on the social media platform you're listening to, and visit our Give page. You can support us also through our Patreon page at The Constructionists. So your support will enable us to continue producing high quality content like you're listening tonight. But even more importantly, we want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. We believe that through our interactions and discussions with listeners like you, we can continue to learn and grow together and develop what we call a communal hermeneutic. So we value your feedback, we value your questions and your ideas, and are excited to build a community around a shared exploration of perspectives. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Let us know what you think, and either we're going to answer them tonight or we will answer them through the week. Whenever you put it on the social media platform, your questions, we will answer them. So tonight, thank you, Sharia and Jake, for joining us. We are continuing through the book of Mark, the life of Christ, a semiotic perspective through the details of the life of Christ in the book of Mark, starting in Mark chapter 14. So we're going to hit it and go right into Mark 14. Jake, why don't you read at least the first part of Mark 14 for us?
Definitely. Mark 14. It was 2 days before Passover and the festival of the unleavened bread. The chief priests and legal experts, through cunning tricks, were searching for a way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But they agreed that it shouldn't happen during the festival. Otherwise, there would be an uproar among the people. Jesus was at Bethany, visiting the house of Simon, who had a skin disease. During dinner, a woman came in with a vase made of alabaster, containing a very expensive perfume of pure nard. She broke open the vase and poured the perfume on his head. Some grew angry. They said to each other, "Why waste the perfume? The perfume could have been sold for almost a year's pay, and the money given to the poor." And they scolded her. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you make trouble for her? She has done a good thing for me. You always have the poor with you. Whenever you want, you can do something good for them, but you all won't always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body ahead of time for burial. I tell you the truth that wherever in the whole world the good news is announced, what she's done will be told in memory of her."
Well, let's stop there because I find that just a natural break in Mark 14. So why don't we unpack this? It seems to me, in a progressive view, that this is a contradictory to what Jesus has promoted all along: to clothe the naked, feed the hungry, house the poor, and dump expensive perfume all over my head, all over my body, all over just because it's expensive and good. So tell me, just unpack this for me, because it kind of speaks something different and counter to the narrative. Shreya, why don't you start us out? What do you think of this?
Yeah, I preached on this the last time I preached, so I've got some thoughts.
Yes.
So throughout the book of Mark, we've seen people, in particular the disciples, trying to figure out who Jesus is and what he's doing.
Mhm.
And even when they land on the correct answer of you're the Messiah, they still have all of these assumptions about what it means for Jesus to be the Messiah, that even with the right answer, they still get it wrong
Yeah.
because they want Jesus to be this conquering hero. And in the book of Mark, this woman who pours perfume on Jesus' head, as he says, prepares him for burial. She's the very first person in this gospel to understand what it means for Jesus to be the Messiah, that involves death and surrender, and not what victory is supposed to look like.
So to interject before you continue, so she's preparing Jesus, obviously, for the burial, or a metaphor of the burial in this act. But the victory is in the resurrection in the Christian narrative. So
Right.
do you perceive in this story that the woman understood that Jesus would resurrect as well?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
We'll get there when we get to chapter 16, but the original ending of Mark ends with a big question mark. So
Right. Yeah.
I kind of think it's unlikely.
I think it is too. I think that she pretty much thought that she was losing the king
Yeah,
at
this
point.
is it.
Yeah, this is it. And she's thinking, well, I'm going to do the very best that I can with what I know. And in my tradition, we adorn the body of the dead or the dying with perfume. And so this perfume is a symbol, I guess, of her understanding or her knowledge or her revealed knowledge of what she thought who Jesus was.
Yes.
Do you have any more thoughts on that, Jay?
I would struggle to say that she thought that Jesus would be resurrected with such an emotional outpour. Literal. And I don't know if Jesus even knew that he was going to be resurrected as well, right?
Right.
I think throughout all of Mark.
Good point.
And really only in John do we see Jesus really know that the end will happen, that he'll be resurrected. And so did Jesus know, or did Jesus have faith that he was going to? I'm not sure. I don't think anyone is sure. And so to put such assuredness on the resurrection, especially Jesus, that his take on it, I think misses the humanist perspective of what Jesus was. Some interesting things, like, as I remember when Shreya preached and looking up like what nard costs today, it's still super expensive. So like it still is out of reach for most people. And who is this lady that had a year's worth of pay in one small vial?
Yeah.
In other gospels, I don't believe that Mark does not talk about the three magicians, so the Magi. And so I might be wrong. Am I wrong?
I think Matthew is the only one that does.
And so even those gifts foreshadow a death, right?
Right.
And so this is the first time that we see in Mark a foreshadowing of death in the death ritual of burial. You can make claim like Jesus' talk about the temple earlier, that was kind of a foreshadow of death.
Mm-hmm.
But really, this is the most poignant one that we have so far. And I think also you have to be careful saying that Jesus was the Messiah to them.
Mm.
He was a Messiah.
A Messiah. Yep.
And so,
Right. But was Jesus the Messiah to her?
I think he was her Messiah, but to say the Messiah, I think it's quick at this point.
Right. Because there's lots of people claiming
and so
like this Jesus status.
In the 13th
Messiah.
chapter, we talk about there'll be many that claim to be Messiah,
Right.
and in the Judean in the Jewish uprising that's going to happen here very soon in Israel, after Jesus' death, there's lots of messiahs that are claimed, and throughout all the Roman occupation, there were lots of messiahs that were claimed, and this is the first one that really stuck.
I find it interesting that this next little section, if I could read this next little section, Mark 14:10 and 11, if you want to throw that up there. Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to give Jesus up to them. When they heard it, they were delighted and promised to give him money. So he started looking for an opportunity to turn him in. So right on the heels of this woman dumping expensive perfume on Jesus, now we have money and trading Jesus in basically for money. So whenever I see that in scripture, anything that has to do with money, there's a greater picture for me. It's like a bigger metaphor. So I see this woman is in the good. She's doing good, which actually in kalos would be beautiful. So she did a beautiful thing for me with an expensive money. And now we have the trader going to do a horrible, evil thing for me and trade me for money. So, I mean, in this section, any concluding thoughts on that? Because I see a relationship there. I just don't know what to quite do.
Well, I mean, if you take that metaphor to the next stage of the Iscariot narrative, he hangs himself in a field and his money spills out underneath him and no one would collect it because it was blood money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that's the spilling of extravagance.
So we have the spilling of extravagance in understanding the Messiah, and it's the spilling of extravagance in understanding the anti-Messiah.
Yeah. I mean, some people may claim that Judas was the one that knew who Jesus was the most and was trying to expedite the process.
Well, I mean, possibly. That seems too far of a claim for me, because Judas was a human being, and so I think that our human beingness has the propensity, we have the condition, I guess, deep inside of us to sell each other out. We want to claim that we never would, but if our life depended on it. So maybe Judas felt threatened. Did he feel threatened that Jesus was the Messiah and therefore they were all going to get in trouble? And they were all going to be thrown under the bus with Jesus? Or did he just feel threatened and maybe wanted to get away from the threat, that Jesus really, was just this quack of a speaker, miracle worker type of person, and he wanted to get away from the situation? Who knows? But yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time believing that Judas would know who Jesus was and then sell him out.
I think that's part of the the Gospel of Judas, which isn't really an accepted one, but
Right,
Mhm.
right.
that there's a divine understanding of who Jesus was, and so
Mm.
that's why there was an expedition.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
It's been a long time since I read it, so I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, I kind of think just looking at the political implications of what Jesus is doing, it's
Mm.
if Judas is smart and politically minded, I'm sure he can see what's going to happen if Jesus continues. So maybe it's not this divinely, understanding the mysteries of who Jesus is, but it's
Mm.
just an awareness of the political climate that they're in.
Yeah. Well, I think that in and of itself wraps up that section. I don't know if there's too much more that we could. I mean, of course, we could probably spend a lot of time explicating and parsing words and such. But those are the big pictures I think that we see, and to really realize that once again, a woman is at center stage of this story. So that again brings up this question or this motif of this narrative that Jesus is continually putting women at the center of the story, whether it be a marginalized person bringing them into community or this woman. Of course, the popes and such probably when they demonized women in scripture, this would be one of the women that were probably a prostitute, and they really demeaned who she was. Yet, however, she got the money in order to purchase the nard, however that was acquired in whatever situation. Um, I think that it's important to note that a woman is at the center of this story. Any more thoughts on that?
Nothing new. That's consistent.
Right.
And yeah, the women are the bearers of the gospel throughout. I think
100%. Yeah.
every gospel or every letter that was written, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John,
Hmm.
especially in the ones that have Jesus' resurrection. And so Mark doesn't end in resurrection, but the other ones do. And
Mm.
so there's a knowingness of the female character in every gospel.
Well, it's the living out of the kingdom being genderless again, that there's no male, female, Jew, Greek, circumcised, uncircumcised in the kingdom. So this is once again the disciples are trying or attempting to live in kingdom, and that's what they're not getting. They're not getting the big picture of kingdom or kingdom, and so they don't necessarily understand all that's going on. So Jesus is the one leading this, bringing this woman into honor with his words that she's done a beautiful thing. And he says that almost in a way that it's like, what are you doing? Right. So it's like a snide, slap in their face when they question, like this
Hmm.
sold and this is, good money. And then Jesus says it in a way that, slaps them in the face a little bit.
Which I'm trying to recall. I don't think Jesus ever gave money to the poor throughout all of any gospel. He
I don't
fed.
think so. No.
Nothing
so,
comes to mind.
It's like why at this point are they saying, well, he could have gave it to the poor?
Well, probably because of like like everything else that was happening around, it made sense. Like it does make sense. You're going to just dump a bunch of perfume on Jesus. That doesn't make any sense, but it's the bigger metaphor that they're missing. They were living in very practical law. Oh, this is the new law. We're supposed to feed the poor, and by doing this, we get to heaven. What place in heaven do you get to sit? And they have these like dumb little conversations that have to do with just more legalism, more rule keeping, more if I do more, then I get more type of mentality. And Jesus then points it towards more of a Messiah, heavenly
Yeah.
type concept here.
So this was a message for the early church. So what was Jesus trying to, or what was the writer of Mark trying to tell the early church?
I think Mark is trying to tell the early church that what you do for the least of these, you do for Christ. And because Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, that's why we do these things. And so we're to love like this woman loved him. We are to love our neighbors the same.
And then if you think about the extravagance of it all, there's two people in Scripture that are in the New Testament, Mark, that lived extravagantly or had an outpouring extravagantly. John the Baptist and this lady who poured out perfume.
Mm-hmm.
And so one was to make way for the coming, and perhaps this is signal that is to make way for the going.
Mm. I'm just looking something up here really quick.
It's a good connection, Jake.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I like that one too.
Say it one more time for our listeners.
So extravagantly, if we look at the idea of extravagance, and most people, I guess most like traditional teaching is that John the Baptist was lived almost homeless, just out there in the middle of nowhere,
right?
Kind of a desert teacher that had just kind of a little crazy, wearing camel skins and eating bugs. But if you put that in context and culture, John was actually living very extravagantly. That camel hair was like the cloaks of kings, and locusts and honey were a seasonal delicacy. So like he had the money to buy seasonal all the time.
Right.
And in the extravagance of it all, John's purpose was to proclaim the coming of the Messiah.
Right.
And that's in a piece of extravagance, that the kingdom is extravagant and the kingdom is coming. And you have this lady, unnamed, who is making way for even more so for the kingdom that Jesus would soon die. So to make way for the going of Christ.
Got it.
That she's now pouring out extravagance.
That is nice. So I'm looking up Lydia, the seller of purple cloth.
Yeah.
Now, when I think about like just the seller of cloth, I go, well, how much money, could she have had, and what did she do with it? But purple cloth, the dyes that they used in purple cloth were expensive, and so purple has been and probably will always be a symbol of prestige, kingdom, king, royalty. That's the idea of purple. So she sold purple cloth and is known to sell purple cloth. So this idea of Lydia, another woman at center stage, right? um, is also extravagant. And what happened with Lydia? What was she?
I don't. Was she in Rome? She was on Paul's journeys.
Right.
She hosted a church in her home, didn't she?
Yes. So she's the first Gentile convert
Mhm.
in the what's would be known as like Europe.
Yeah, she was a Phoenician that specialized in indigo.
Right. And so she's an outsider being brought in. She's now like this extravagant person, um, that lavished in extravagance. And maybe there's something to that, a connection with now what did she do with that cloth from that point forward? Who did she sell that cloth to? Who did she give that cloth to? I just wonder, like it wasn't just a benefit to Paul, it was a benefit to the early church. What kind of people were the recipients of her cloth?
I mean, I doubt that anyone would want to wear it because it's an immediate target.
Well, maybe.
It's like wearing fur that you're going to be doused in
True.
red paint, basically.
True. Okay, well let's go to the second part. Um
I can read this again and do the where are we
yeah,
going to?
the Last Supper.
Okay. Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to give Jesus up. When they heard it, they were delighted and promised to give him money. So he started looking for an opportunity to turn him in. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was sacrificed, the disciples said to Jesus, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover meal?" He sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the city. A man carrying a water jar will meet you. Follow him. Wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, already furnished. Prepare for us there." The disciples left, came into the city, and found everything just as they had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. That evening, Jesus arrived at the 12. During the meal, Jesus said, "I assure you that one of you will betray me, someone eating with me." Deeply saddened, they asked him, one by one, "It's not me, is it?" Jesus answered, "It's one of the 12, one who is dipping bread with me into this bowl. The human one goes to his death, just as is written about him. But how terrible it is for the person who betrays the human one. It would have been better for him to have not even been born." When they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them, and said, "Take this, is my body." He took a cup, gave thanks, and gave it to them, and they drank from it. He said, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. I assure you that I won't drink wine again until the day when I drink it anew in a way in God's kingdom." After singing songs of praise, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
Okay. So, what do we do with this that's new?
My question is, that I've always asked the question is, what was Judas giving up? Jesus wasn't in hiding. Everyone knew where he
Right.
was. So the chief priests, they could have found him at any time. And so
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Judas was, again, a story for the early church. Like this is not just to tell the story of Jesus' betrayal, because Jesus didn't need to be betrayed.
Right.
And so what was the message for the early church?
That we're Judas.
Yes and no. I think it has more to do with, at the time of writing, you could actually sell out your friends, sell out
Right.
the underground church that was there.
Right.
And so Jesus wasn't underground, right? Very public,
Mhm.
very, very, very public. And so at any moment they could do that. And so
It reminds.
perhaps it was he was selling out when he would be most alone. But I really think it has more to do with early Christians selling out their friends to try to remain safe.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's more of a relationship thing. Years and years and years ago, I was in Vietnam and I was visiting a missionary there. He was a pastor of the underground church in Vietnam. And at the time, the church was very much underground. They met in like a warehouse. They moved around a lot. And so it was quite interesting and different for me to connect with a pastor that moved me around. So my wife and I show up and he says, call me from this payphone. So I walked up to this payphone that was there and I called when they had payphones. I called him from this payphone and he said, okay, meet me at this. Then it was on one corner. And then he said, meet me at this restaurant down the road. So I met him at a restaurant down the road and we sat down and we just ordered some tea or something. He just said, let's have some tea. So he visited with us for a bit. And he said, well, my wife is waiting for us at this other restaurant. And so we walked to this other restaurant and it was all a diversion to keep the government from following him and quote, finding out where he was. But then when you think about it, they're like, okay, so they've tapped his phone, they tap his offices, they tap everything that he's about. They're literally following him around, so they already know where he is, and they already probably know where the church is meeting. So why would they be needing me to sell him out? And I think that that's more Judas wanting to be in relationship with leadership, or Judas wanting to be in a relationship with those in power to keep him safe, versus them trying to figure out where Jesus was.
Mm.
And so it's all in Judas's case, trying to side with power versus betrayal.
Yep, that makes sense.
Well, let's do a quick study on this meal. So while they were eating, he took some bread, blessed it. This is my body. This is where Christians in the early church were thought to be cannibals, right? And then he takes this cup. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly, I say to you, I will never drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. So there's 4 cups, as I remember.
In the Jewish Passover Seder.
In the
Yes.
Jewish Passover. There's 4 cups of wine. And correct me if I'm wrong, you have the first cup is sanctification, right? The Kiddush.
Mm-hmm.
Proclamation, blessing, and last cup.
Praise.
There. Okay, thank you.
And some are saying sanctification, deliverance, redemption, and praise.
Okay, is that the Jewish lineup?
I mean, I think they can be all interpreted different ways.
Sure.
There's lots of different. Yeah, but it's usually sanctification, so we're God's holy people set apart.
Right.
And you have deliverance with an outstretched hand and mighty arm. And
right.
You take your pinky and you dip in the wine and you put on a plate as God blots out sin and also blots out enemies. Then you have the cup of redemption, which this is the cup that Jesus sits down with and breaks bread. And surely I will not get to the cup of praise until I'm in the new kingdom.
So the cup of the blessing, that's because he says what he says at the end. Most commentators would say that he's drinking of the cup of blessing and refusing the cup of praise.
Correct. Cup of, yeah. I mean, it could be redemption and refusing praise.
Okay.
Or blessing, refusing praise. But
okay, so
you got to look
Go
at blessing in the Jewish tradition is not your own blessing. Blessing is that you bless God.
Right.
You're not blessed, you bless God.
Right. Well, there's a transformative, before we say goodbye to Sharia today, because Sharia is leaving us here in a couple of minutes, and then Jake and I are going to continue for a few more minutes.
We're going to kill chapter 14. Oh,
yeah, we're not gonna do much with chapter 14. There's a transformative experience here that is taking shape, where Jesus is taking his life and turning it into a metaphor, where he's taking his life, his death, his burial, his resurrection, and turning it into the metaphor of the Passover. And that is transformative. And what's really interesting is we make a huge jump. And the woman with the nard is our huge jump. So we've jumped from don't tell people who I am. I'm not going to reveal who I am. I'm a big secret. Don't tell your friends. Keep quiet about my miracles. Don't tell anybody what you saw today. To she knows what she's seeing and doing.
A lavish outpouring.
And now we're going to jump to, now I'm going to show you what the real deal is. And that he does it with this metaphor of the Passover. So Shreya, thanks for joining us today. And thanks for joining us today. And we're going to just continue on with Jake. And so
here we are.
Let's talk more about this. All right, let's go back to the text in verse 25, where it says, "Truly I say to you, I will never drink again." So he drinks this cup of blessing, or one of the cups, redemption, like Jake was saying. So this cup that he doesn't drink, though, is the cup of praise, probably. So he's not singing, or he's not drinking this cup, but it definitely seems like that the others do, because in verse 26, after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So this hymn that they would have sung is in Psalm 113 through 118, and that's after the cup of praise. So it's obvious that at least a portion of the group definitely sang the hymn after the last cup. So they finished the Passover, even though Jesus might have not finished the Passover. Doesn't mean that he didn't finish the Passover, though. That's probably reading too much into the text, because all he says is, I'm not going to drink of the fruit of the vine again. He's taking his life and moving it and driving it with this metaphor. And so that metaphor becomes the centerpiece of the narrative versus the details of the actual process of the Passover. So I think Christians get too hung up in, well, what did Jesus actually do during the Passover versus just looking at the bigger picture of the metaphor of the Passover.
And then when you look at this next section right here, and they'll say that, well, Jesus never, and we even said a bit of it too, I think, because it's ingrained in us. Well, Jesus didn't go into the cup of praise. The whole, they sang songs of praise and they went out. That is the fourth cup.
Right.
And it's I think we are talking about that last psalm. Yeah.
Right.
Psalm 115 to 118. So these, Jesus did the entire Passover. And so there's this theology out there that I mean, we were even taught that the Passover wasn't finished.
Right.
when
Right.
really it's finished.
Right. And honestly, it doesn't that's a detail that really, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that matters too much.
Totally. Yeah.
It's not a thing. Um one thing I do want to point out though is our version of the Last Supper. And our version of the Last Supper is Da Vinci's Last Supper. And I think that's a really poor view of the Last Supper.
Like actually the physical depiction
Physical
of it.
depiction.
Not the Eucharist or the communion.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
So the physical depiction of Da Vinci is very Eurocentric. So number one, all the characters are seemingly, European looking. And then number two, they're in a very European styled eating. So they're all sitting up at a table in a line. So you've seen that picture that the Last Supper is, and it's famous and it's, it's beautiful.
Seating for
I've seen it
24.
myself. Huh?
Seating for 24.
Exactly. Like I find it beautiful myself. I've seen it. It is beautiful. So you have this like depiction, this Eurocentric depiction. If you go south of the equator, you begin to see different views or different ideas of the Last Supper, different depictions. And most depictions of the Last Supper are not in a line unless they are just taken from the European type view. So if you go into some Spanish speaking cultures or, Central South America, Africa, in the countries of Africa, you will see different depictions of the Last Supper. And usually what you see is some form of seating arrangement, not in a line, but in the round. So if you go to the Franciscan monastery in Lima, Peru, which I've been, and there's a painting there. I can't remember the painter's name at this moment. There's there's a painting there of, I had to look it up really quick, but there's a painting there of Jesus sitting with the disciples in the round.
Correct.
But it's more, there's more to it. If you just look up Lima, Peru, and the Last Supper, just Google it and you'll find it. And in the St. Francis monastery there in Lima, right in the heart of town, which they have great ham sandwiches in the restaurant right next door. But ham and queso, ham and cheese. So you see this picture is much different than our normal Eurocentric picture. This picture there's women and children all around as well. It's not just the Last Supper, 12 disciples and Jesus. It is all of these people in the round. And then in the windows, what's really interesting about this picture is in the windows, there are people looking in through the windows on the Last Supper. So this picture of Jesus and the Last Supper, women, the disciples are there in the round, women, children, all there. Children are seemingly, and I don't know if we're allowed to show that, but
it's on my phone now, so it'll be okay.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So women and children in the round, but seemingly the children are serving and playing. So you see this idea of it's not this somber death time. It's a celebration, like it was. It was about praise. It was about redemption and proclamation, and so it's words and praise and deeds and serving each other this wonderful meal of the Last Supper. So below the equator, it seems. Now, I might be mistaken because there might be other cultures that depict Jesus' Last Supper and around. But for just simplicity, what I see below the equator in a lot of countries that I've been to is it's depicted and pictured differently. And the how it's pictured differently is more accurate, I think, than a Eurocentric view. So family would have been there, women and children would have been there, the disciples would have been there. They would have been all together.
Well, I mean, if you
In
look
this
at
place.
even the text, and I'll go back there. Where are we at? There were other people, lots of other people in the room.
Right.
And so he sent 2 of his disciples go into a city.
Right.
And so then they prepare a meal. Disciples prepare a meal. Then the 12 arrive.
Right.
And so right then, and then they ask, well, who is it? Well, it's actually, he's going to narrow it down now that it's actually going to be one of the 12 is going to betray me. And so just looking at the text, there's a lot more than just 12, 13 people there.
Right. And it makes sense that there would be, because who's making the food and who's delivering the food to the tables. And I mean, just simple like questions like that answer that unknown. Yeah. So I looked up the name Diego de la Puente. Is the painter Diego de la Puente. In the 1600s, he painted this painting, and it's a beautiful painting. It's actually like quite unknown that it's there. It's not like this major attraction. So you walk into this St. Francis Franciscan type monastery, and at the end of this room, basically this long room, there's this painting sitting at the end. It's roped off, you can't touch it, but definitely it is a prized possession of the Peruvian Christians in Lima. Now, what is another interesting fact is the Lamb of God, or the lamb shank that is at the Jewish table. That is a sacred animal for them. And what's interesting is over time in different cultures, the lamb is not necessarily sacred to other cultures. So other cultures put a different animal in the center of that table. So I know that in New Guinea, I think it is, where they put a chicken at the center of the table. So it's a chicken of God. It's not the lamb of God, it's the chicken of God. But in Lima, Peru, or in Peruvian culture, the guinea pig. So if you've ever had guinea pig, tastes like chicken. Now, it tastes like a gamey type meat, which is quite good. Guinea pig is a prized delicacy in Peru. So at the center of the table, the center of this Diego de la Puente, is a guinea pig. There's a guinea pig at the center of this table, and they call it the guinea pig of God. And so instead of the Lamb of God, you have the guinea pig of God. But this whole interpretation, Jesus in the round, there is a metaphor there as well that's often missed, that I think that the church could live in more of the round, could live in more of the La Familia, the family type atmosphere, where the brothers and the sisters, yes, not by blood, not by blood, but because of the blood of Christ, because of this cup of blessing, because of the new covenant, we're brought together around this Eucharisteo. We're brought around the Eucharisteo of praise, where Jesus lived, yes, died, yes, betrayed, yes, buried, yes, but we live in this hope of the resurrection of ourselves as well.
Yeah. It's great.
Any other thoughts on that?
In that same painting,
Yes.
the artist depicted Judas as the Spanish conquistador that ruled Peru at the time.
Mm.
Conquistador, just Spanish ruler, I guess.
Yeah.
But you look at what is the meaning behind Judas, and I can't think of a better one than that of improper use of power.
Right. I want to put, if we could, just a website. I'm not sure if we could put. There's also one in Cusco.
Yeah, that's
to Gastro Obscura.
Yeah.
But
there's quite a few around that have the same motif of.
Right. The one in Lima, Peru, though, is the most, I think, famous and the most detailed. If we could just put that in our show notes, I'll just drop it in the messages, Jake, and then maybe you can put it in there. Hopefully that's a good website. We'll check that out before we post it. All right. Well, with that, I hope everyone enjoyed that material, and we are excited to finish the book of Mark. We're moving into cults, and so hopefully here by latter or mid-August, we'll be in our series on the cults and the occult. So we're going to describe and describe what each of those are, and we're going to take a handful of cults and go over them, what they believed and why they did and have done what they do and have done in our history. And so if you have any questions for us, or if you have any thoughts or comments, please just post those on the comment section of the social media channel you're listening to. If you want to give to us, remember, go to resonatelife.org, and you can give to us on our give page, or patreon.com, where you can go to the Constructionists and you can give there as well. All right, with that, good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.